Welcome, everyone. Excited to be talking with Nate Rhoton, CEO of 1 in 10, an LGBTQ nonprofit delivering youth services in Arizona. As part of Pride Month, we're going to have a little conversation about hard conversations, what in the VL vernacular we call crucial conversations. And excited to talk with you, Nate. So thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about how you guys have those hard conversations. Can you give a little bit of background on 1 in 10's vision and mission?
Absolutely. And Dave, thank you for having me on. Appreciate being a part of this. And as a VL alumni, I'm just excited to be on this with you today and share a little bit more about 1 in 10. 1 in 10 has been providing services here in the Valley for 30 years to LGBTQ youth and young adults, now serving ages 11 to 24, and doing that through a variety of social and leadership style programs, really ensuring that our youth have what they need to be the most successful that they want to be and can be in life. And that obviously has changed over the 30 years, but we have certain core pieces around self-esteem, suicide prevention, leadership, et cetera, that have always been part of our program and have continued to evolve over time to answer the needs of the youth in Arizona today.
Great. I did not know 30 years. That's
Yes.
Impressive. And glad
Almost
we
as
have
old
you.
as me. Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, and almost as old as VL. VL is a little over 40 years. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And glad you hope to see another 30, 40, 100 years here in Arizona. So I know one of the things in your program you talk about are having those hard conversations within Valley leadership and our particular catalyzed curriculum. We call them crucial conversations. How to talk with people that maybe don't understand things the way you do, different perspectives, and just on topics that aren't necessarily easy breezy conversations. So we center our crucial conversations around what we call our principles of doing, which are the values we want our leaders to operate from. What principles of doing are important when we think about hard conversations, in particular with your work?
In reviewing the principles of doing that Valley leadership operates from today, all of them speak to me. And I think each one of them is critically important in its own way, particularly the integrity piece. However, the one that I want to focus on today that I don't necessarily think has been front and center necessarily at 1 in 10 until really the last few years is Arizona First. As we look at what 1 in 10 and ultimately the youth that we provide services to have faced within our state and in other states across this great country, it really comes down to what we're seeing politically and also in the social stratospheres, social media, that has really been a decidedly different aspect to being a youth today than it was 10, 15, particularly 30 years ago. And here in Arizona, like we've seen in other states, we've seen quite a few legislative priorities and ultimately bills aimed at LGBTQ youth. And the message that this sends to our young people can be a difficult one. And I personally pride myself in being more pragmatic, a centrist. I grew up in a very Republican family. I am currently registered as Democrat, but I work for an organization that really needs to be nonpartisan as we are a 501c3. However, we can do certainly issue-based advocacy and need to as we amplify the voices of our young people. So it's not about political party. But a lot of the discussions that I get into as the CEO do oftentimes go along those partisan divides and really looking to seek to understand where someone is coming from and meeting them where they are is critically important. If you go into a conversation like that with just your own set of priorities, you're not going to get anywhere. And both sides are going to be talking at each other instead of with each other. So for me, it's really important when I talk to someone, no matter what their background is, no matter how much familiarity they have with the LGBTQ community, is to really understand where they currently are in that language and in that knowledge. And then go from there and see where there's maybe some movable pieces there. Or understand where they are, and then tell them through some different stories of different youth and some of the things they're going through, where you can connect back to their own set of values. I have a lot of family members and community members that are active in the Mormon faith and other faith-based communities. And ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of those faith-based communities operate from a value system that incorporates putting family at the center, or other different values that are just as important to the queer community as they are to those communities. So being able to talk to it in a way that you're really talking about what's more common than where we're not, I think is where you're going to start to see some movement, and understand that at the end of the day, we're more alike than we are different. And putting that Arizona first priority, I think is so key, and focusing on what's, as you all have it outlined on the VO website, about what's not necessarily best for a political party or an individual, but for the greater community. And how when we fully embrace individuals, regardless of the community that they're from, for who they are, and support them to be their best selves, we all benefit as a city, as a county, and as a state by our citizens feeling supported.
Completely agree. And so that gets actually to our first question, which is, when you sit down with individuals and for what is a hard conversation, and exploring where they are and meeting them where they are. I love that characterization. What are the key components you go into to have that hard conversation? What should individuals keep in mind when preparing to have a hard conversation?
Yeah, I think going back to really understanding who you're talking to, and trying to connect with that individual from a standpoint of their own personal values. And sometimes that's not something you can just Google, you can't look at someone's resume and understand what their values are, but you can ask certain questions. For instance, when I talk about 1 in 10, I may share a little bit about some of our programs, but then I'll ask them, like, where did you grow up? Where do you have kids? Do you have grandchildren? Do you have a niece and nephew? Do you, and what are you seeing in the youth that are in your life? Because just because someone doesn't have kids doesn't mean that they don't have young people in their life that are really important to them. And oftentimes I have folks all across the political spectrum, all across Arizona, that will share with me, my niece just came out and she lives in this county and in this small town, and I worry about her, because I don't know that she's finding all the acceptance that she needs. And so you'll hear that from someone that is, again, all different kinds of backgrounds. So you can't immediately judge someone just based on one fact that you know about them. And I think asking those clarifying questions is really key. So then again, you're connecting with them on those areas that are important to them, and then maybe looking to move them a little bit more to understand your community and where you're coming from. I think any leader that represents a marginalized community, and you can think of quite a few of them here in our great state, and that's what makes Arizona, I think, really special, is we have so many different tribal communities. We have Black and brown communities, when folks really start to talk about the communities that they represent from those shared values and what's important, then I think you can get into more conversation where it's seeking to understand as opposed to talking at one another. And that can be helpful across political ideologies as well.
So taking that a step further then, how do you approach those hard conversations with individuals or groups who may not necessarily support or even be knowledgeable of about LGBTQ plus issues? What steps do you take to build trust even in those even harder dialogues?
Yeah. Again, I think this is coming down to, you're not going to be able to change someone 100% in one conversation, particularly when you're when you're representing very opposite sides of an issue. So seeking to understand, asking them questions to clarify where they are on a particular issue and maybe what their understanding is. One of the common questions that I get, even from people within the LGBTQ community, is around pronouns. And they'll ask me, what is the deal with pronouns? Why is this such a new quote unquote fad? I'll oftentimes hear people say, or they'll say, well, isn't this just a phase that, a certain young person is going through, that they want to be identified in this way? And my answer is always, it's probably not a fad. It's not a phase. While certainly there are young people that are navigating different parts of their identity, and they may change a little bit over time. This is something that frankly has always been in existence from time and all eternity. It's just now we have language and community to support those identities. And that is why the pronoun piece is so critically important, because by using the pronouns that someone identifies with, you're letting them know that you see them, you're seeking to understand them. It's how hard is it for me as a cisgender individual, meaning that my gender aligns with my gender identity aligns with my gender I was assigned at birth. How difficult is that for me to use a they them pronoun with someone, because that better aligns with their identity that they have? If that's going to help them to feel seen, heard, and understood, I want to do that, because I want to treat them just as I would want to be treated. If we go back to the golden rule. So I think at the core, we all have this desire to be seen and understood and heard, and using the correct pronoun is just the first step in doing that with someone. For many of us, it's not all that difficult, but for some folks, this is a newer concept. And so I think getting into that with them and talking to them about what their experiences are there, and then giving them some specific examples to help them to understand where you're coming from without being argumentative, even saying, yes, I understand where you're going with that. However, have you considered this? And so you're not telling them that they're wrong. You're not telling them that you don't understand, or that there isn't pieces to their argument that maybe make some sense. But in doing that, you're helping to build that trust, that then the entire conversation is going to be more fruitful because of that level of trust, and them understanding that when they speak, you are listening. You're not immediately coming up with your rebuttal, but it's an opportunity to understand where each other are in their thinking.
Yeah, that's why building trust is another one of our principles of doing. They all
Right.
link together when trying to get things done, and again, meeting people where they are to see something happen. So you do a lot. Speaking of another principle of doing, driven to do, you do a lot, and you've always been committed to nonprofit service, serving on the Arizona Steering Committee of the Human Rights Campaign, on the board of the Greater Phoenix Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, on the LGBTQ advisory to the Chancellor of the Maricopa County Community College, lots of other stuff. How have you managed to persevere in the fight for change in your community and keep having these hard conversations? Do you have any advice for other leaders who are looking to do the same?
Yeah, this is a great question, because over the years, I remember when I was passionately fighting for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And most of the youth we serve nowadays at 1 in 10 probably don't even know what that is, or they do, but they don't remember it. So it's been a long fight. And I think with any example of these sorts of social movements in history, those that are on the front lines of that fight can feel exhausted. And particularly when we see a backlash like what we've seen the last few years, when we saw so much movement in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, and then now what's perceived as a backlash against our community by some. It's really important when you're doing this work that you do recognize your own exhaustion, and that you take time off when you need to, you step away from the conversation when you need to. I have oftentimes when folks will come up to me at a restaurant, or I'm out with some friends for a birthday at a bar, or that type of thing, and they'll have something really that's on their mind that's important to them to talk to me about. And I've really become accustomed to letting them know, I really want to hear this from you. This is important to me. But now is not a time and place where I'm able to really give it the focus and attention that it deserves, that you deserve. Do you mind emailing or calling me later, and let's set up time to really focus on this? And almost 100% of the time when this happens, the person's like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so sorry. So I think sometimes when someone really is passionate about something, they want to talk to you right now and they see you and they're like, oh, Nate, I wanted to ask you about this. It's okay to tell them, no, not right now, but do it in a way, again, that's respectful. And, sometimes when people are coming up to me to talk to me about something they're particularly passionate about in that moment, it may be driven by some other things going on, and they ultimately don't end up reaching out. And that's okay if they decide later on that it's, hey, I don't know what I was thinking in that moment. I don't know that I need to take this up with Nate right now. That's okay. But when they do, it's definitely a better conversation for later. And so I think it's all around boundaries and setting those boundaries for yourself and for others so that you don't end up running yourself ragged, which I have certainly done in the past. I've recognized when it doesn't serve me well. I don't always respond with that level of, logical and respectful response. And I think that's something that we see in some of these conversations where people then react in anger or in a disrespectful way, because they're not at a place where they're emotionally available to be able to really have that difficult conversation. I think we as a society need to recognize that we can't be 100% ready all of the time. And that's just not possible to do that. So giving yourself grace and, again, those boundaries to be able to say, no, not right now, but in a nice way, it's key. And I think that's just as important as having the difficult conversation in the first place is creating those boundaries. And then also ensuring that you have a good framework or group of friends or a network that you can go to. I'm really fortunate in the work that I do that I have a group that I'm a part of that are it's 14 different CEOs from different nonprofits across all different sectors here in Arizona. And we meet once a month for a half of a day. It's facilitated by a professional facilitator. We focus on different topic areas, but then there's kind of open time too, where we can all just bring different subjects to the forefront and just hear from one another. And sometimes when I ask a question, even just asking it makes me realize, I hadn't really thought about this in that way. And then other people, echo back different aspects of it. And ultimately it ends up letting me see it in a different light before I go to my staff or my board of directors or the community. And it gives me that sounding board. And I think that's what's so critically important. No matter who you are or what you do in life, is having that sounding board and that network to be able to vent to, so that when you do have those difficult conversations with the constituency that maybe is a little opposite of yourself, you're prepared and ready for that conversation. And we all deserve and need that, no matter how we identify or what community we're from or what we do.
Yeah, great advice. It's hard to have a hard conversation when you're not in the right mind space, and
Right.
It's to no one's benefit ultimately. So at 1 in 10, you prioritize investing in Arizona's LGBTQ plus youth. Since starting your various programs and counseling, how have you seen this investment bolster and support the community in living out their identities?
I think one of the best examples of this comes from our summer camp program called Camp Outdoors. In its 15th year of operation, Camp Outdoors provides an inclusive outdoor space, camping space for young people. And this year we have an 8-day long session in July, and then we have another session over Labor Day weekend where we'll look to serve 250 unduplicated youth in all kinds of different workshops and programs, from self-esteem and suicide prevention to your typical camp programs like high and low ropes courses and archery to drag 101 and different things around LGBTQ history and politics and all kinds of things like that. And it's really incredible to just see how the young people that come to camp within that time period, that short duration, really, it's like a concentrated version of everything 1 in 10 does all in 1 week. And you see how when they leave camp, they know that they're not alone. And I think that's what's so incredibly important for young people. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school. And I went to a different school for 6th grade, different school for 7th, different school for 8th, and a different school for 9th. And that was really not fun. Especially being a closeted gay boy that was really little. I didn't grow until like 11th grade. So I felt really alone back then. And I see some of our youth that come to camp or come to our various programs, and I can see that in them. And so by giving them these experiences where we're showing them firsthand, and also through their interactions with staff and volunteers and the other youth, that they're not alone. It's such a critically important message for young people to hear and to feel, so that they know when they go home, there's this whole network of folks out there that are just like them that they can reach out to. They can participate in our virtual programming, our Discord server. They can come to our actual programs at our youth center in downtown Phoenix, or the soon to be 18 satellites across the state. So there's this comprehensive support network there. And I think, you just see that firsthand in these young people, how when they go back to their communities and, for instance, they start the first GSA at their school. We've had countless youth that have attended Camp Outdoors where they go to the workshop about how to start their GSA, and they go back and they do that in their community. So think of, back to your question about supporting this community and living out their identities. We're giving them the tools to be able to go back and do that. Everything we do at 1 in 10 is with the, we deliver it with the knowledge that our youth are incredibly capable, resilient, important young people, and that they have all the tools, but they just might need to have some direction or like understand, oh, here's something you can do. And it's like that aha moment of, oh, I don't have to complain that I don't have a GSA at my high school. I can go back and start one, and here's the steps to do so. And then if they need support along the way, they know that we're here and they can reach out. We have seen at 1 in 10, and this is true for youth across our nation and in our state, that there is an incredible need for more assistance around behavioral health. And that's another area that 1 in 10 in our new strategic plan that we are really going to double down in, and partnering with other agencies that are doing some of this work, training agencies on how to be more inclusive, but also ultimately offering some group therapy and individual therapy right in our youth center, to ensure that our young people, that there's no hurdle in their way to accessing those services of care that they so badly need. But I think all of those pieces help to support them and help them to truly be their most authentic self, and to really live out their identity and their dreams and goals.
Was there a Camp Outdoors for you when you were younger? And if it, what would it meant if there wasn't, or was?
There was not. I went to Scout Camp and a couple of other camps, mostly religiously affiliated, and nothing against the religion that I was when I was young, but it just did not align with who I was, and it ultimately made me feel like I was wrong for being who I was. I've seen a lot of advancement in a lot of organized religions to be more accepting and inclusive, and that makes me hopeful, because I do think that the spirituality piece is important for a lot of folks, and something where I hope that folks don't have to choose to leave a spiritual following because of their identity. But there wasn't a Camp Outdoors back then. I would hope that I would have gone to it when I was young. But I'm 45. I'm the same age as Valley Leadership, because I was class 38 when I was 38. So that's how I know that.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that little history. As a leader in the LGBTQ community, and as a leader in all communities, really just serving on behalf of Arizona, thank you. What does Pride Month mean to you?
Dave, I've had a really interesting, or trying to think of the right word here. I've had an evolution, I would say, internally around Pride Month, because I will say when I was younger, I really loved it, but it was, when it was first kind of coming about and you saw companies starting to come out and support. And then I went through a phase where I thought it was really not important. And I thought we were, in some ways, companies were just sort of catering to us during that month to show their support. And then we didn't see anything else all year round. And I think we've seen this in other marginalized communities with specific months that quote unquote celebrate those identities or communities. And now, though, I think what we've seen is a lot of organizations and companies recognize that Pride Month is 1 month, the month of June, where we celebrate LGBTQ folks, employees, staff members, customers, or whomever the company may be. But that it's ultimately where we lay the plans, or that organizations lay the plans to then support that community that's important to their business line for the entire year. So I feel a little differently about it now because I've seen companies take that next action step to really ingrain it into the fabric of who they are and to make it more important than it is just 1 month. But that month is still, it still has meaning. And I think for LGBTQ folks working in companies across our state, it's important for them to know that their employer supports them. But then I think, they also need to be able to see that that employer is not just talking about it during that month and it's happening elsewhere throughout the calendar year. But it's rooted in that month, and that's where those plans are maybe started or begin. And that's okay. I think it's a really positive piece. I also think back to, when I was a young kid and certainly very closeted and praying that God would help to change my identity and all of those pieces, and seeing my first Pride, what that did for me inside, and ultimately kind of what our summer camp does for our youth, lets you know that you're not alone and that there are so many other people out there just like you, and you're not wrong for being in your own skin. I think that's where Pride Month is still critically important, and the more visibility we can give that so that young people out there, or old people or middle-aged people, or any person knows that they're not the only one that is feeling these feelings or that is going through what they're going through, and they can reach out and find community.
Well, thank you very much for all the work you do, again, not just in the LGBTQ plus community, but across the state. Quick call to action for those that want to learn more about 1 in 10, visit their website, 1n10.org. Also, you can visit BL's Catalyze program, valleyleadership.org/catalyze, learn more about how we have hard conversations. Nate's group has those hard conversations, many more conversations to be had. And I'm thankful and glad I live in a state that you do as well, and that you're eager and passionate about having those conversations to make the state as best it can be. So thank you, Nate. Everyone enjoy Pride Month, and we will see you later.
Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate you.